Hello, and today we're going to be reviewing the Ryobi P411 random orbital 5-inch sander. So let's get started. Okay, starting off with the model tool, we have the sanding plate. Overall, the sanding plate is a fairly standard design. It's a 5-inch sanding plate that has a 4-bolt securement system for when you need to replace it, and it features a 8-hole dust collection system. So overall, it's a standard design. There really is nothing too exceptional to write home about, and it does its job just fine. Overall, the Velcro feels like it's about as standard as it gets. It's nothing too exceptional, but it does its job. I haven't had any issues with it dropping sandpaper, so it gets a pass. And moving upward, we have the 18-volt battery slot. The 18-volt battery slot will accept any of Ryobi's 18-volt batteries and overall does a fairly decent job. The battery locks in nice and securely, and I haven't had any issues with any sort of looseness or jiggling that might affect the operation of the sander. So overall, it gets a pass. Okay, let's talk about the dust port as well as the dust bag. Now, the dust bag is, well, it's not very good. Mine had a thread that was already starting to unravel, and the quality of the material just isn't all that great. So I have to say that this is an area that needs improvement on Ryobi's orbital sanders. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of this. Now moving on to the port itself. The port itself is somewhat functional, although I have to say that I think this is also another area that Ryobi needs to improve upon. I have the Ryobi 3-gallon 18-volt wet dry vac, battery operated, blah 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 blah, and it sort of fits into the port, but the problem is when you fully insert the hose into the port itself becomes unattached from the body of the sander. I don't know if they have another port that's meant more for a vacuum cleaner design, but the only one that came with my sander was the one that was on there. So at the end of the day, I really think Ryobi might need to reconsider the way they design some of their dust collection ports, because it doesn't seem to work all that great with vacuum cleaner accessories, and a lot of people like to use vacuum cleaners or shop vacs as dust collection systems. So yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of the dust port on this particular tool, and I think it could use some improvement. So yeah, this is an area that the sander comes a little bit short in my opinion. Okay, let's talk about the grip. Now the grip on this particular tool has a nice rubberized texture, which definitely makes it more comfortable to hold than some older sanders I've messed with. So I really do like the rubberized texture. I will say, however, that the ergonomics of this particular sander really aren't all that comfortable. I think it might be more comfortable if you have larger hands, but for somebody who has a little bit smaller size hands like mine, it's not really all that great of a tool to use, at least when it comes to the ergonomics. So yeah, I think this could use some improvement, but it's not horrible, so it still gets a pass. Okay, moving on to the on-off switch. Overall, the on-off switch is a push-type on-off switch. You push it one way to turn it on, and then you push it the other way to turn it off. Overall, it's adequate, and I don't have any complaints about it. It will prevent the tool from accidentally starting, so that's a good thing, and, well, it really is adequate. On a newer model, they've changed this, but I don't really have any complaints about the older model, so yeah, it gets a pass. Without a battery, the sander weighs 1,156 grams, or a little over 2.5 pounds, and with a 4 amp hour battery, the sander weighs 1,863 grams, or a little over 4 pounds. So overall, it's a middle of the pack sander, at least when it comes to weight. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the sander's performance and what it's like using. Overall, this sander's performance is fairly decent. I didn't notice any sort of swirl marks on the material that I was working on, and overall it does keep its speeds up fairly well when you're pressing down on it. Although once you start pressing down fairly hard, then it does slow down somewhat. But like I said, there were no swirl marks, and that really is what matters when you start using a sander like this. Now, this particular sander is not going to be in the same, well, bracket or quality as something that a professional woodworker would probably be looking for, but it fills my particular needs, and I don't really think amateur woodworkers or even semi-professional woodworkers would find anything majorly wrong with it to complain about. Now, the runtime with this particular orbital sander is around 16 to 17 minutes using a 4 amp hour battery, and around the 17 minute the battery will start to lose power, and at 18 minutes the battery was depleted completely. So overall the performance is adequate, although I personally think it could be a little bit better. If they had decided to go with a brushless motor, that obviously would have made it more expensive, but it also would have given you a longer runtime. If you want something with a longer runtime, you're going to have to either get bigger batteries, a brushless sander from another brand, or just get a corded sander, which is probably the route you should go, because battery operated sanders just are not going to give you a very good performance, at least when it comes to runtime. But I was happy with the performance that I was getting, and I don't do a whole lot of sanding personally, so it's something I don't need a high quality tool for a lot of the time. But for those odd jobs, this does do its job just fine, and I don't really have any major complaints about just how well it worked. There's some minor issues with maybe just the way I think that the grip is shaped and the dust collection aspect of it. But other than that, I think most people will be perfectly happy with this particular sander. So let's move on to the pros and cons, or recap with them at least. And the first pro is 18 volts. Overall, this particular sander does a fairly good job with its 18 volt power level, and I don't have any complaints about how well it operates or works. And being 18 volt means that you'll be able to adapt batteries over from other brands via third-party adapters at your own risk. So yeah, this is a pro in my opinion. And next up we have cheap. Cheap is definitely something that's going for this particular sander. Coming in at $45, this is going to be one of the cheapest battery-operated 5-inch orbital sanders on the market. So if you are looking for a cheap sander and you don't mind adapting batteries, this is a good route to go. Rubberized grip. Overall, the rubberized grip on this particular tool is fairly decent. I like the rubberized material because it helps with the vibrations, and overall it gives you a nice strong grip. I've used sanders in the past that didn't have a rubberized grip, and quite frankly those are kind of a pain to operate. So I do like the rubberized grip, and that is a pro in my opinion. And the last pro is effective. Overall, this particular sander is perfectly effective on most materials that I used it on, and I'm pretty happy with just how well it worked, especially considering the price point. So yeah, moving on. And the first meh and only meh is brushed. Overall, having a sander that has a brush motor isn't the end of the world, but having a brushless motor is definitely superior, and I really hope Ryobi eventually releases a brushless orbital sander. But until then, this is about the only option we have, so yeah, moving on. And the first con is the dust bag. The dust bag just is not made out of a high quality material, and mine was already starting to unravel when I got it out of the box when it was brand new. So I'm not a huge fan of the dust bag on this particular tool, and I think the dust port could use some improvement. So in my opinion, this is a con. And next we have the shape of the grip. I have a little bit smaller sized hands, and the grip on this particular tool just is not all that comfortable. I love the rubberized texture, and I think that is definitely a major improvement versus some older sanders I've used, but overall the shape of the grip on this just is a little bit awkward feeling, and I think it needs to be revised. But it's not that big of a con, it just is a con. So yeah, moving on. And last but not least, we have runtime. The runtime on this particular tool isn't horrible, but it's still not going to be as good as something that has a brushless motor or that is corded, obviously. The runtime is around 16 to 17 minutes of good power with 1 additional minute of dying power using a 4 amp hour battery. So I'm just not really all that impressed, and I really think that this is another area that could possibly use some improvement. But considering the price of the tool, it really isn't that big of a con. It's just something that you need to be aware of if you do end up purchasing this sander. And that's it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on the sander. Overall, I'm not somebody that does a whole lot of sanding, and for my personal needs, this is more than enough. I really think if you're a professional woodworker or somebody who does sanding all the time, you're going to be probably better off looking at something that's in a little bit higher price category. But for those of you who don't do a whole lot of sanding and only do it occasionally or almost never, this is going to be more than enough to fulfill your needs. And I think most people will be happy with just the overall performance of this tool, and you can't really complain about the price. So as long as you know what you're getting into, this particular sander does come recommended. And that is it for this particular video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe and share, and we will see you next time. God bless.